Hello, in this video what I'd like to do is pick back up on the archiving topic, and we're going to cover document retention policies. So in the very first video I did on archiving, I went over how to set up a secondary storage location for your archiving. So by default, if you just start archiving documents, it's just going to archive it into a subfolder under the existing cabinet. Um, if you're looking to free up disk space or get those archives on another network share, another hard drive, I cover how to set that up in the first video. So if you want to do that, go back and watch that first before you start archiving your documents if you want to pick that secondary location. Since we've done that, I'm now going to get into how you set up document retention policies. If you're going to use document retention policies for archiving at your site, the first thing you'll need to do is edit your worldox.ini file. And I have that right here. And you're going to have to go down to your preferences section. You need to add a line to it. So right here, I've already added it. This retention equals 1. That lets Worldox know that you're going to do document retention policies. So just open up your Worldox INI file, look for your preferences section, and then you'll need to add this line, retention equals 1. And also, before you edit this, make a backup copy in case something should go wrong with your Worldox INI file. You got a backup before you made these edits. And then once you add that, just save it and close it, and then go ahead and start WD admin. Now what we need to do is we need to go into cabinets and select the cabinet that we're going to do document retention policies on. In this case, I'm going to do it in the client files cabinet. So I'm going to just double click on it, or you can highlight it and hit the edit button so you get to the edit screen for this cabinet. Then you have to pick which field are you going to set retention policies on. So as I mentioned in the first video on archiving, the two more popular settings that we get at sites is either doc type or matter. So at a lot of our corporate sites, they have document retention policies as part of their corporate policies, and it's based on their different types of documents. So therefore in Worldox, they want to set their document retention policies based on their doc type code. At a lot of our law firm clients, what they like to do document retention policies for is as they close matters in their time and billing or accounting system, they then want to close the matter in Worldox and archive it. So they would select matter to be their document retention field. So first thing you have to decide is which field do you want to do the document retention policies on. Then once you select it, you're going to go into settings. So I'm going to go into settings on doc type first. And right here at the bottom, you see retention rules. You have to check that box. Once you check that box, it's going to make that field part of the document retention policies. Now, you're not going to check multiple fields. Don't go in and choose doc type and matter, or doc type and author. Pick one field that you can do retention policies on and then set it up for that field. So in this case, if we wanted to do it based on the doc type codes, we would choose retention rules on the doc type. If you wanted to do it on the matter code, you click on settings and check number 11, retention rules on matters. I'm going to go ahead and just go with doc type for this example. So I'll set my retention rules, click OK, and then I'm going to save my cabinet. Now what you need to do is you need to set up the rules for each code in that doc type field table, or if you set retention rules on matter, then as matters expired, you'd want to set the rules on those closed matters. So I'm going to click on my field tables button here. I'm going to choose client files. I'm going to go into doc type, and now I'm just going to edit one of these fields. I can edit it by double clicking on it or highlighting it and hit the edit button. What you'll see now once you set the retention rules is you'll see this additional options down here. By default, each code in the field table that you set retention rules on will be undefined, which means it's not going to take any action. Nothing's going to happen to documents with that code. It's the same thing as if you checked no action for the retention rules. And as you add new field codes to your tables, they'll default to undefined. What you can then do is decide what you want to take place. So if I want agreements to be archived after, let's say, 5 years, I can choose archive after, choose the number 5, and then choose years. and now click OK. Now I've set a retention rule for any document that's saved in that cabinet that hasn't been accessed in the last 5 years. It's going to go ahead and archive it. And by default, when you're using retention rules, it's based on the last access date of the document. Now, if you want to change that so that it's based on the last modified date, then what you'll need to do is contact WorldDocs Tech Support. They'll connect to your system and they'll make another change in your system to change that so that the retention rules would be based off the modified date rather than based off the access date. So you'd basically go in here and repeat this process for each code in here. So let's say you had something like memos or notes. Let me go back in there and hit the edit button instead of selecting it. And once you select, let's say notes, maybe for notes, I don't want to archive it, I want to delete it. And I can say notes after 2 years, delete them. So you can decide if you want no action to be taken, whether you want the files archived, or whether you want the files to be deleted. That's up to you on how you set that up. And if you have the WorldDocs salvage bin set up, then when they get deleted, they'll go to the salvage bin, and then whenever you purge them out of the salvage bin, they get purged at that point. So that's how you would set these rules up, and you'd have to do this for each one. If you don't set anything, then no action will take place. Once you get all these set up the way you want, then the way you actually run the archiving for retention rules is you have two methods. You can either go into WD-admin and manually do it, or you can set it up as a scheduled task on your indexer. So if you want to manually run it, you go into WD-admin, you pull down the Run menu, and you choose Archive, Delete. You choose the cabinet, and then you'll do a computed date or choose a specific date. You're going to enter a code, and you can do a test run. What the test run will do is it'll just show you what files meet the criteria for archiving or deletion to kind of give you a preview of what's going to get changed in your system. Or a full run will actually just run the archive and the delete. So you'll run that process, and that's how you can do it manually. Now, if you want to do it via the indexer, and this is what most of our sites do that are running retention rules, is I'm going to go into my indexer console, and I'll go into my schedule, and what you'll do is add a scheduled event. And what you want to do is just make sure it doesn't conflict. So you're probably going to run this on the weekend. Right now we've got our knit and builds running on Saturday night at 10 o'clock, so we don't want it to conflict with that. So maybe we'll run these really late Friday night, early Saturday morning, because you want these to run prior to your knit and builds running, because it's going to be migrating documents and deleting documents, so it'll be thinning out your production document store, and you want to get a fresh database build on that thinned up document store. So I'm going to click the Add button on the schedule and hit the drop down, and I can see Run Archive Delete. And then you're going to say what days. I'm just going to pick a day, and I'm just going to run this on Saturday. And I'll start this at let's say 2 a.m. And then you can also add an email address so you can be notified if this event actually ran and when it finished. So if I want to add an email address, I can click the Add button, add the email address, and it'll assign it to that task. Now that I've run my archive delete at Saturday morning at 2 a.m., then at Saturday night at 10 p.m., it'll go ahead and build those databases. Now, if you set up a secondary storage location, so when it does archive the files, it's not going directly underneath your cabinet folder structure in an archive subfolder, but it's actually getting moved to another location, then it's going to have a separate set of databases for it. So what you're going to want to do is also add a scheduled event to update those archive databases after you do your Run Archive Delete. So if I move this schedule out of the way, I can see right here I've got my production databases, and I've got my archive databases. Now, your archive databases, you don't need to update every night because you're not actively doing anything to them. But once a week, when you run your archive, you're going to want to then update those archive databases so their searching is up to date. So what I'll do is, since I run this at 2 a.m., maybe at 4 a.m., I'll run an update to the archive databases. So let me just hit an add, update meta and text, and I'm just going to choose my archive database. I'm going to run this Saturday, and I'm going to do this at, let's say, 4 a.m. as an example. And once again, if you want to add an email address, you can click the add button and you can get alerted that the job ran and get a log sent to you. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So now I have my archive delete running at 2 a.m. on Saturday, my update of my archive databases at 4 a.m. on Saturday, and then Saturday night I get an init and build run on my production databases. And I'll just click save, save the schedule, and exit out. And now you're set up. And now at this point, once you get all your rules set up for each of those field table entries, and you've got your schedule set up, it's just automatically going to run for you. So it's just going to keep your databases up to date. It'll automatically run and archive and delete files that meet the criteria. The same thing with if you went with matter code instead of doc type code. As a matter closes in your accounting or time and billing system, then you would go in and edit that field table code in the matter table and assign the retention rules at that time and say, once, maybe your policy is once it gets closed in the accounting and time and billing system, then we want it archived 3 months later from WorldDoc. So you could just set up the rule to say archive after 3 months. It's going to be based on the file's last access date. So if you want the retention rules to be run on the latest modified date, just contact tech support. They'll go in and make a quick change to your system. So instead of it doing the retention rules based on the access date, it then does it on the modified date.